Ahem! The story you are about to hear has been told before. A lot. And I am going to tell it again. But different. Hi everyone, welcome back, finally, to Rainstorm Creations. It sure has been a while, hasn't it? Over the last year and a half, I was spending time making the one and only, and very well known to have traumatized many an artist, including me now, 15th anniversary Strawberry Miku. Though also in this time, I made an OOAK repaint, a 6-foot-tall battle axe, an OOAK repaint, some free-run glass paintings, an OOAK repaint, an arcane drawings, and a custom BJD project. Of course, that's not the important part, though if those projects sound interesting to you, you should head over to my Instagram where I post a lot more projects. But if that's not your speed, that's okay, hit the subscribe button and stay tuned. Something tells me that things might get a little more lively over here soon. I wrote wink, but you can't see me, so imagine I'm winking. Anyway, I also need to mention that this is a very special collaboration with my friend Steffu Doll. Together we made the Vocaloid duo Hatsune Miku and Kasane Teto. Stick around to the end of the video to see the finished dolls, and go check out their video and their work after this one. Now, I'm sure you're yelling, "Get on with it," at your screen by now, so let's go. For this project, I'll be using a Generation 3 Draculaura head that I've shrunken using the Catmillion Studios method, and an EAH Raven Queen body. Yes, that's right, I'll be combining an EAH body and a G3 head. How did that go, you ask? Great. Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. So anyways, let's take a look at Strawberry Miku together and get a better idea of what we're dealing with here. Alrighty here, let's take a look. Yep, I'm cooked. This is a bit overwhelming, so instead of looking at all the things I have to make, we're going to look at all the colors to see what materials I'll need. With the list made, I'm going to head off to my local Joann Fabrics, RIP my love, I miss you in the big 25. Here, I grab all my fabrics, beads, and trims I'll foresee myself needing for the project. Now that I have all the materials, it's time to get started sewing this beast of an outfit. So, let's start by begging my dear friend the Pastel Bat for help. The Pastel Bat is a talented seamstress and doll artist. After this video, please go check out her other work over on Instagram, and she also has a YouTube. Batty did me a huge favor and made the pattern for Miku's shirt, which you can see me making here. It took a long time and a lot of stitching and a lot of little tiny folds, but this is how I did it. So I started by cutting out the pattern from the pieces, then I sewed together all of the tiny pin tucks, and then of course I ironed everything flat because I use a heat erase marker when I'm making things, and also because pin tucks need to be ironed flat. You should always iron your seams, very important. Next step is going to be to work on the embroidery along the edge of this, and so I took it out to the mountains and I worked on it out there. It was beautiful, and this is actually the intro video you were watching before. So I was actually working on this project while I was working on the intro, so thank you very much for that. Then, after I have it all complete, which took much longer than you would think, I put it all together and sew it into a shirt. So of course that means it's time-lapse time. And after that fun and exciting time-lapse, don't worry, this is the only sewing time-lapse I'll put in, but please know that each and every single piece of this outfit was hand-sewn like this. I take my mini hair straightener and iron the shirt. And with that, that is the first piece done. I'm super happy with how it turned out, and thank you so much again to the Pastel Bat for her help. Alright, got one of the main base pieces of the outfit down. Let's continue down that path and make the main skirt next, shall we? The main skirt is this fluffy, high-low monstrosity that I had to figure out. I ended up with this very strange U shape. Because I wanted the skirt to hold this shape as well, I'll be using this iron-on interfacing. The skirt on Miku has a musical staff with this low-key, nonsensical song on it. One of the Easter eggs I'm still kicking myself for not putting in is replacing this sheet music on the dress with Miku's The World Is Mine sheet music instead. Speaking of kicking myself, I also mucked up the order of marking these bars and ironing on the interfacing. Why, you ask? Well, as previously mentioned, I use heat erasable markers in my projects. I'm sure you can see where this is going. Yes, watching that hurt me just as much, if not more, than it hurt you, but with the magic of editing, just like that, it's good as new. Now I'm going to mark out where the music notes go, as well, so that I can begin the embroidery journey. You still can't see me, but I did jazz hands. The embroidery and beading for this skirt took so long, I actually had to work on it over the course of a couple months and on various different trips. I even took it camping one time. You can ask my friends who were on that trip with me, I'm pretty sure they thought I was crazy. Which, they were right of course, but it still hurt. It took so long that it's actually part of the main reasons that I had to drop the original collab for this project. The other reason being, I don't think I had the skills needed to finish it. But that's okay, here we are, a year and, I guess a half now, past the original deadline, and me and Steph are still standing. Look at us go. Anyway, that's the musical staffs all done. I'm quite happy with how consistent the stitching looks. I then began working on the notes. These are going to not just be embroidery, but also beaded, because I'm extra like that, you know. Here's the mock-up I made, and as you might have guessed, it took a very long time. Here's the beadwork complete, and yeah. Now I'm going to make the ruffle, which is kind of a long tapered piece of fabric. And then I'm going to gather it to the edges of the skirt and then sew between the outer skirt and the lining. I chose to make the lining of her skirt red in my version for Strawberry Miku for functional reasons. The back of the embroidery showed through all of my white fabrics pretty badly, and honestly, I think it makes my version look unique. The last thing to do is to gather the skirt to the waistband, which, let me tell you, was kind of a struggle. The interfacing helped with the stiffness of the skirt so that it held its shape well, but it made it difficult to gather and to sew to the size of the small waist of the doll. But of course, it was worth it in the end, and here is the final skirt, and I am so happy with how it turned out. I cannot believe it is finally finished after so long. Let me know what you think of it, and if it was worth all the work down in the comments. Let's continue with the main pieces and the embroidery themes and work on the sleeves next. For the sleeves, I marked out my pattern and the embroidery pattern in more heat erasable ink. I use this for marking things because I found it to be the easiest to get rid of when I don't need the marks anymore, and I find them really annoying, like, if I, leave the marks, so yeah, heat erasable ink. Then it's time for, you guessed it, more hand embroidery. By the way, for my embroidery, I just use cheap embroidery hoops that you can get for like $2 at the craft store. They work pretty well for what I use them for. Another tip is that I don't cut out my pattern piece before embroidering. I keep it the excess so that I can use the hoops, which is really helpful for the straight line embroidery that I'm doing on this project. Of course, these are the sleeves, plural, so we gotta make two. Editing magic, woo! Man, I wish it were that easy in real life. Anyway, then I transitioned to a year after I originally embroidered these, and get everything ready to be sewn together into the final sleeves. I'm going to be so for real, most of the patterns for this project were kinda cursed, but they worked, and it can't be stupid if it worked. Of course, you can't forget to iron your seams, that's really important, especially with things this small. And then with the addition of these cute little red bows, the sleeves are done. I sneakily added some beading to these when you weren't looking for some extraness, and I'm super happy with how they turned out. Okay, now let's take a quick look at the giant bows that sit, sadly unseen for the most part, on Miku's back. These are pretty straightforward. I cut out the pattern pieces, sewed the dark pink to the light pink good sides in, and then flipped them right side out and ironed them flat. For the outer layer of this, I'm going to be using this dotty lacy trim that I originally picked up from Joann's for this exact purpose. Except, get that out of here because I have a better idea. I'm going to be using this mesh instead, and you'll see why in a moment. I sew down the mesh and in the same shape as the bow tails, and then I'm going to add this small, ribbon trim that's really pretty. And then we'll get back to the tails in a moment, but what you're not seeing is me being extra again. Take a guess as to what that means. This pink bow has kind of a crazy 4-leaf bow thing going on, so I make 4 rectangles and sew them good sides in and flip them right sides out and iron them, of course. Then I'm going to stitch them into the 4-leaf bow shape. It involves a lot of finagling with thread and ironing it and pliers because the needle wouldn't go through all the layers of fabric, but we got there in the end. and with that, the pink bow is finished. And if you guessed that me being extra again was adding more hand beading, you would be correct. Gold star! I thought these pearls made a perfect finishing touch, and even though you really can't see it in the final, I know that they're there, so that makes it worth it. Of course, the bows on the back are a two-part system, so let's quickly make the red bow on top. I made these bow tails by folding my shiny red fabric around some of my iron-on interfacing. Then I add this really cool ribbon lace on top. I'm gonna be so for real, I think this lace is so cool. Look at the way it's just like, I don't know, anyway. Then I thread this ribbon through the lace and attach it to the bow tails down the middle. And of course, I can't resist being extra and adding some gold beads. You know, for the bit. Then I make the red bow part on top, and it's all finished. I love the combination of what like lace and ribbon can do, and how different it can look like depending on the different combinations you use. It's so cool. And the last piece of clothing that I'm going to focus on closely is going to be the shoes. For the shoes, I used a 3D printed base I made and then created the shoe part out of the same red fabric I've been using for the rest of the doll, the iron-on interfacing, and some thick cardstock paper, and so much glue. Honestly, that interfacing was the real MVP of this project. I used in a lot of the clothing pieces. It's funny because normally you don't want stiff fabric when making clothes at this size because at this scale it looks like real off, but using it to almost sculpt fabric into the shapes that I wanted was really interesting, and a different technique that I'll probably experiment with again. For making the top part of the shoe, I cut little slits around the fabric to make it so that it can lay it flat down on the bottom of the shoe. I don't know if that made any sense, but essentially I'm just gluing the excess around onto the bottom of the shoe so that it's flat. I used Fabri-Tac glue for this because it dries pretty quick and is pretty strong from what I've found. Oh, and another important thing is I make sure that the paper I used for the sole was thick enough that it could withstand holding this amount of glue. That was kind of important so that the shoes didn't just like fall apart on me. Once I had the two top parts of the shoes, I painted the heel part in gold acrylic paint, not forgetting to seal with Mod Podge, of course. Then I glued the top onto the sole and covered the seam with some gold thread. The shoes came together fairly quickly, and in the end I added some pearl bead flowers on the toes. And I'm so happy with how these look, and will definitely be making shoes this way again. Honestly, they're so good, the doll could stand on her own. If she weren't so darn heavy anyway. Alright, so I have a confession to make. I kinda don't want to keep talking about how I made each and every piece of clothing. So instead, we're going to speedrun the last pieces of the outfit so we can get to the fun parts. The hair, the face-up, the 3D printed parts, and the final pics, of course. So, let's do this. We have the gingham side skirt, which has this wonky shape and lots of tiny bows made of embroidery thread. The other top skirt, which is this like ruffly one, which was kind of a pain to figure out how to pattern despite it looking very simple. The bloomers, which you can find the pattern I used down in the description. I love this pattern, and this is the second time I've used it. I used it on my little goat girl Capella the first time. The corset, which I actually made twice because the first one didn't have the right shape and made me crash out. Here they are side by side for comparison. I like the top one more. I don't want to hear any comments. The bow tie, which I bent a tiny safety pin into the shape of a treble clef for, but low-key don't know how, because I was so focused. The side bow, which I think is so stinking cute, like, look at all those little beads, oh my gosh. And finally the socks, which are just like normal socks with little ruffles and bows added to them. Finally, let's talk about the 3D modeled and printed things, specifically the headphones, fork, and custom doll stand. Again, I'm not going to dwell on these much, but I 3D modeled and printed these and then painted them with acrylic paint and sealed them with Mod Podge and high gloss varnish. Now, of course, is time for the best part, the face-up. The first thing I had to do was color match the head to the body with watered down acrylic paints. I think I did a pretty good job color matching too. Normally I'm not that good at that, so I think I've improved, which is great. Okay, for this face-up I wanted to keep some of the original look while also incorporating some of my own touches. I guess that's the theme throughout this whole project, adding my own touches to things here and there. This video is getting kinda long though, so I'm gonna skip over the sketch a bit. I recently picked up these very fine nail art brushes, and they've made a world of difference when I do face-ups. I'm very heavy-handed, so I have a hard time making very fine lines, but for this project I felt like it has gotten easier. I said earlier that part of the reason I didn't finish this project originally was because I didn't think I had the skills to finish it back then. I've improved on my craft so much since I started this project, and what's cool is I can see my progress every time I break out my brushes and start drafting a pattern, or even just sketching, honestly. I don't believe that practice makes perfect. I've never liked that saying. I say practice makes progress. Anyway, enough of the sappy stuff. Man, I got so many tiny details into her eyes. I'm so happy with the little flowers. Also, off camera, I added 3 coats of high gloss varnish with a little bit of mica powder mixed in to give her eyes a little magical shine. Okay, moving on from the face-up, while I was working on it, you may have noticed the strange silver things attached to Miku's head. Well, those, my friends, are a stroke of creative genius, if I do say so myself. They're a special type of magnet. Here they are. I've had these bad boys laying around for a while for a different project, and I thought they would work for this one. The little casings are 3D modeled by me, and I stick wires into the holes that I left open at the top. And, that's a lot of wires. But don't worry. After some nightmare fuel, I thin them out a little bit, so they're a little more balanced and a little easier to manage. This is what that looks like. And then, I take the time to arrange the wires. This took a lot of patience, and I had to do it twice because there are 2 ponytails, and I'm just going to preface the rest of this section by saying that I really, really hated making these twin tails. The whole process took me like 3 weeks of suffering, from bending the wire to making the hundreds of wefts. Yes, I really made somewhere in the low 200s of wefts. Here's what they look like drying. This is not even half of them. This is like some of them. It was ridiculous. And then gluing them onto the wire was a messy process where I had to glue each weft individually and then smooth it down on the inside, which was terrible, and then the outside was worse because I would glue it down and then the inside would stick, and then I'd have to like brush it down with a toothbrush again, and the hair gel. Yeah, it was terrible. Don't recommend. But if you ever do want to make gravity-defying twin tails of doom, this is probably the way to do it. Mine ended up super stable, and the best part is the finished product is still completely detachable from the rest of the doll. It was just really gross. Like, I think this clip does it justice. Like, look at how gross this is. Like, the gel is with my... Anyway, then I take the lace and I glue it around the outside of the ponytail to kind of hide that edge, I guess, because it's kind of gross. And then I glue on the ribbon at the bottom, and then the hair bows that you see on the final product are actually made the exact same way as the red bow on the back of her outfit that I showed you I made earlier. They just have shorter, like, tails, essentially. And then after I glue that on, I just take a little red bow. This one's very similar to the ones on her gingham skirt. And then I glue on this little pearl flower. And with that, the twin tail is essentially done, but I made 20 of these little pearl flowers. Each one takes a while to make, and then glued those onto the ponytails, but you'll see that in the finished product. For the back of her head, I needed to make the hair look like it was parting in the center, and then going off to the sides and into her twin tails. To do this, I glued down folded around wefts, and then cut them to length, and I glued them down with Fabri-Tac because, and just as a side note, it turns out it's super annoying to cut hair when your scissors or razor blades stick to the magnets that you've embedded in your doll's head. So keep that in mind, I guess. And then I just take more gel and smooth the hair into place with my fingers. For the bangs, I took a page out of April Rose Art's book and styled the front bangs using her spiky hair technique, minus the tiny iron. I don't have one of those, but it worked really well with just some watered down styling gel and my fingers. And unlike her twin tails from hell, the bangs on Miku's head were actually pretty easy to style, and it was actually fairly pleasant. I'm also very happy with how the colors of her hair blended and how they look on the clothes, and how well I was able to, like, replicate the colors of the original art with my art, I guess. And of course, I don't know how I haven't mentioned it yet, but all of the credit for this amazing design goes to the original artist and Morikura. Definitely go check her out, all of her links are down below. And as I'm cutting her bangs and finishing up, like, trimming this fluff, I'm thinking about how close I am to finishing this project. Like, I'm sitting here recording my voiceover the night before the YouTube video goes up, but I can't believe it's almost done. And with that, I'm just gonna paint on Miku's iconic 01, and then she'll be done. And this project took me a year and a half. I conceived the project like back in, I think before July of 2024. So with these last few paint strokes of this 01, may I finally present to you my version of Hatsune Miku 15th Anniversary Edition, Strawberry Miku. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check out Steffi Doll's Kasane Teto doll. I had so much fun collaborating with them, and I really appreciate them agreeing to collab with me after all this time. I would really like to thank all my friends who were there and supported me on this 1.5-year long journey, and another special thank you to the Pastel Bat. Please go check her out as well, and every single other link that I mentioned or anything that I used that wasn't my personal thing is down in the description. Of course, now is the time I say goodbye. Go make something, and I'll see you next time. Bye!